All right. So I just want to give context. So I'm just going to read our little introduction and then we'll go into it. And go into it means I have some questions. Hopefully those that's joining us have questions or will have questions at some point. But this is really a space for you all to share your stories, but also, and it just always troubles me to have to say this, but share tools for those who, God forbid, find themselves in these situations, right? So this is welcome, good folk, to part 2 of our For Us, For Everybody, For What We Do Next. This is the Black Advocacy Symposium, our second installation. It's presented by Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation. It is accompanied by our special issue of Black Advocacy for the African American Folklorists. One of the biggest things that we're coming to understand and trying to put out there, this situation is bigger than race, this situation is bigger than class, and it's something that needs multiple communities to come together, listen, and ask questions and the like. So tonight's conversation is about what happens when mothers are forced to become investigators, forced to become strategists and public witnesses, because the system that claims to protect life often move first to protect themselves. The women joining us tonight didn't meet in the easy place of life. I don't think you two met at a Little League game, right?
Right.
So it was ultimately police violence. What most people don't see is what happens behind the scenes after police shootings. The speed of the official narrative, the pressure placed on family, the missing evidence, the silencing, and the blame. And often the public is invited to question the worthiness of the dead rather than the actions of the people who pull the trigger. Tonight we are honored to welcome Miss Narene Stokes Crosby, mother of Ryan Stokes, and Miss Sheila Albers, mother of John Albers, alongside, and I've grown fond of this writer, Miss Susan Berardi. I can never say her last name. Could you say it for me, please? I said
Berardi.
it right? Okay,
yes.
Good. I'm sorry. Who's reporting and storytelling and writing and curating helped illuminate how these cases reflect the broader system. Okay, so remember, this is not a spectacle, folks. This is not an expose, but a working section rooted in care, truth, and practical strategy. I say strategy. I see my brother on here, who also is an ethnographic field documenter and oral historian and folklorist, and ethnomusicologist, because I think they're both the same. But don't tell anyone I said that, because they get very touchy. But before we get to all that, I know I gave a brief introduction. I would like to give the floor to you all to share your stories, and then we'll get questions from there, if you don't mind. You know, tell us who you are, what your story is, and let's start there. Either one, Miss Sheila, Miss Narene?
Sheila's alphabet, Albers, Sheila.
No, I actually think, Narene, you should go first, because Ryan's story comes first, and you have been fighting this longer than I have. So you
okay.
Go first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Narene Stokes Crosby. I am the mother of Ryan Stokes, who was born on October 18, 1988, and he was killed July 28, of 2013. He lived 24 years in a good life, in a good upbringing. And then he was killed by the police that I had instilled in him that the statement is what? To protect and serve, to trust the police, to be able to call on the police. But then it was the Kansas City police who killed Ryan. Innocent, unarmed. Ryan was a all boy to me. He was my only son, my baby boy. I have two girls before him, but Ryan was the little head of the household for us coming up. He was our joy. He was the person that we could talk to and knew that he would be a good young little man. We were trying to bring him up to be the best man that he could be in this society, in this world. And he just had a lot of love from me, a lot of love from his sisters and the whole family. They were just, everybody was crazy about Ryan Lee Stokes.
Well, yeah. I have to say to both you, Miss Narene, and you, Miss Sheila, I actually said it to you already, Miss Sheila and Susan, Miss Susan, that reading your accounts, and I've witnessed and read quite a few things, and this was one of the toughest things that I had to ingest. So I can't even say that I can imagine how any one of you all feel. Before I ask any questions, I would like Ms. Sheila to tell her story, that we can go from there.
Sure. So John Albers was born December 16th, 2000. He was actually born in Minsk, Belarus. My husband and I adopted John internationally when he was 18 months old. He was like Ryan in the sense of all boy. There's lots of things Ryan and John had in common, even though they were not the same age. Sports, just a love of playing sports. John had white blonde hair and ice blue eyes and a very intense personality. I would say that he was all in. He was a goalie on a soccer team, and he did it fearlessly. John was my oldest of three boys, and Narene and I both live in the Kansas City area. I live in a suburb of Overland Park. At the time when Ryan was killed, Narene was living in Kansas City, Missouri. She lives in Grandview now. And John struggled with some mental health issues starting in late middle school and then into high school. And on January 20th, 2018, John was shot and killed by an Overland Park police officer on the driveway of our home. He was in the middle of a mental health crisis and was pulling our minivan out of the garage. And an officer fired into our minivan 13 times, and 6 of which hit John, and he died at the scene. Narene and I met through a community activist who knew both of our stories and asked if she could introduce us. And this was spring of 2020, if I remember correctly. It was right before COVID, before the shutdown. And we were introduced, Narene and I were introduced to each other on a Zoom call. And I remember Narene on that call, and I remember her talking about Ryan, and I just felt an instantaneous connection to her. Both Ryan and John were unarmed. Both of them, at the time they were killed, they were not committing any crimes. And then the way we were both treated in those weeks and months and years afterwards were very similar. And we represent what it looks like when police have killed an unarmed person, and then there's no justice.
Susan, would you like to share where you stand in this threesome?
Sure. So I met up with Sheila in the fall of 2020, and I was living in St. Louis at the time, and she obviously was in Kansas City. And there was just an instant rapport that we had. And as she and her husband talked about John's death, how it happened, and she had 2 years at that point, not only to grieve, but to go through the entire process of quote unquote investigation that the police did, and the outcome, how she was treated. And we can get more into that. They can get more into that. And the cover up. And there was clearly a cover up. And as I was talking to her, in the back of my mind, I was like, this story needs to be told. But it needed to be told in the context of a country that is reeling from police violence, especially to the African American community, where this injustice was becoming a very common occurrence, and people were too okay with it, I felt. Sheila actually is the one that introduced me to Narene. And Narene is a light, a soul light. And the first time I met her was in the basement of her attorney's office. And I just immediately connected with Narene. And once I heard her story about Ryan, which had happened 5 years before John was killed, Ryan was killed. And as the two mothers started talking about what happened after, it was so similar. The cover up, the language that the police used, the strategy and the stalling, and the entire persona of the police in each case, even though they were two separate police departments, was eerily similar. It was like they were using a script or a playlist, a playbook. And if you put the two women's stories side by side, they were exactly alike in how they had been treated and how their cases were utterly dismissed by any of the forces that where we could have seen justice prevail. And so in both of their cases, there were two major things that happened to me. And one was the outrage at the injustice that befell the two of them. But then also this amazing friendship, this bond that Sheila and Narene had, that was so clear from the moment I saw them both in the same room. And with everything that they had to deal with, in this heartbreaking, gut-wrenching loss that they had each experienced, how strong they were together. And that's why I realized that this is a story that has to be told.
Well, you know, I have a couple of questions. The playbook is something I want to get to as well, because another person I was part of this special issue didn't use that terminology, but pretty much said the same thing. So I would like to talk to you all about that. But before we do that, Ms. Sheila, you made it very clear that both you and Miss Narene come from two different parts of Kansas, right?
Kansas City.
Kansas
So,
City. Please.
They was talking about Missouri side and Kansas side.
Yeah.
So would you two or three explain what these differences are? Because what is the difference in the communities? What are the difference outside of location?
Kansas City is Missouri. It's supposed to be a show me state, and they do the show me state by being. It's an inner city. It's a low. Where I was living, it was considered low class to middle class, and there was a lot of racial divide there. So where I stay and Sheila stay, you would say I was in the majority of the Black community. Sheila was in the white. I mean, they have the mix, true enough, but it was majority white. So there's a difference. The Missouri and Kansas try to make a difference of that, but they just cuz they really right there. What, we 15, 20 minutes away from each other,
right?
Maybe, give and take.
Not far. I mean,
not far at all. So, but they consider her area suburb and mine's, ghetto. Let's just break it down. I was in the ghetto. She was in the suburbs. And I don't really know where Sue was in the middle. She's always been in the middle with us. But
I was, at the time, I was actually in St. Louis, living in St. Louis.
Right. So she's But my belief, Lamont, in this is that we all bleed and breathe the same. There's no racial divide for me to say that I'm prejudiced or, injustice of Sheila and Sue. And they're not of me, because I gravitated to Sheila. I wanted to just hold her, when her baby got killed, John, because she had nothing, no other friends, nobody that she knew that could connect with her like we could. And it was all Black women that were going through their sons or daughters getting killed. And then here comes Sheila, the white woman. And I mean, she didn't feel bad. I told her, she's the white girl, but she's my Sheila. She's old Sheila, so that's how we connected. And then me and Sue, I connect with her. It just hit. I mean, I sat there and looked at it because I didn't know nothing about what she do, no books, no nothing. I was lost in this. I was lost in this league. I don't, I'm here though. I'm here.
Yeah, well, you are, and you are here. All of you are here, and I think that was. I asked that question for a reason, because, and you've set up so much for it. It was multiple Black women, but what we find out is it doesn't matter what side of the tracks you're on. This is a thing, and what makes it it's already unfortunate, but what highlights it in this day and age is what we're seeing going on, because it's usually Black folk getting shot in the middle of the street, on the news at least.
Correct.
But now we saw a white woman, I believe a white man got killed by ICE within the last right?
Yes, Alex Preedy.
Yeah.
Right. So we're looking at I guess the broader picture of how this affects everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I want to start with the first hours, from the moment you realized, and I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, both you ladies had this realization at different times in the situation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you walk us through that, and what was maybe your first decision before you even had any piece of information?
Oh. So the night John was killed, my husband and I and my other two boys were not at home, and John had posted suicidal type comments on his social media. And so his friends called 911 because they were worried about him, and they were doing the right thing. And the police went to our home to do a welfare check. So when John pulled the car out of the garage, the officer didn't identify himself, shot into the van, and John was killed. And we weren't very far away. We were at a extended family's home, and I got texts quick. Like, I pulled my phone out of my purse and I see these texts, and a mother's instinct always is like, okay, something is very wrong. And so we jumped in the car and we were home. And when we pulled onto the street, yellow tape was being put up and there were lights and sirens everywhere. And I bolted out of the car and I bolted down the street, and I tried to get to our home, and a police officer stopped me, and I said, is my son okay? And he stopped and he said, he has passed. And that was what we got. And so I dropped to the ground, and we sat on our neighbor's porch and then in a car waiting for someone to give us information, waiting for someone to tell us something, until my husband finally pulled a police officer aside and said, what is going on? What has happened? And an officer shared with Steve that they were waiting for the officer involved shooting investigation team to arrive. Oh, and my husband asked, why can't we see John? Because we wanted to physically see him, and we were not allowed to. And my husband's like, what is the officer involved shooting investigation team, and why do I care? And that was our first hint that a police officer had killed John. And that, I can look back now and realize they were trying to hold back information. I guess our first thought was, why would a police officer shoot at John? Like, it just seemed absolutely unimaginable that would happen. And so our first thought was just to get our questions answered. Why would this happen? And then really it was good friends of ours who that evening said to Steve and I, you're going to need an attorney. And I remember thinking, why would I need an attorney? What do I need an attorney for? Like, why would I need? And they put us in touch with who ended up representing us. And I'm very grateful to this day for that friend and for the attorney that represented us, because I think without that, we would have just been another statistic. I mean, we just would have, 17-year-old killed by police officer. Mm-hmm. That's the end of the story.
Ms. Narene?
My not knowing that the police had killed Ryan left home that night to be with his friends, 24-year-old young men, single, going down to an entertainment center that we have in the city called Kansas City Power and Light. It's a free, you can go in there. They have no choice to get in, but it's bars that they can go to and they can hang out and all that. Well, Ryan and his friends decided they wanted to just go down and hang out because it was one on his birthday, and they weren't dressed because they have a dress code there. And so they were going to stay on the outer, they stayed on the outer part of it since they couldn't go in because they wasn't dressed right to go into the power and light. And the slang that they used, they knew that they had a lot of rules down there, and they kept on saying, well, they're down at the Kansas City Power and white because they were already prejudiced down there. You had to have on the right shoes. You had to have on shirt, pants, whatever. So Ryan that night had on gym shorts, and I knew he knew that he couldn't, get in any of the bars. So him and his friends said they all hung out on the outer skirts, watching the girls and laughing with the people and all this. Well, in the incident of white boys coming out of a bar and Ryan and them standing there, all in a group, laughing and talking. This white boy is screaming at his phone. So somebody done stole his phone. Somebody's got my phone. He points over at whose group? Ryan's group. So they're all saying they don't have his phone, or whatever. And so he gets up there in face contact, and they up in each other's face. And the white boy's telling Ryan that one of them that stole the phone. And Ryan's standing there watching him scream at his friend, and Ryan tries to be the peacemaker and push him back, so they want no swinging, no fighting coming about. Well, the police see this. They had police on the outer part also. I guess they watching all this, and what they do is they don't say nothing. They don't try to, break them up or see what's really going on at that time. They turn around and they pepper spray them. They bring out the extinguishers, and they act like it's about 1968, Lamont. They act just spraying them with the tear gas, and so a lot of them ran, and a lot of them dropped because it burns, Well, Ryan's reflex was to run, him and a couple of his friends. And the white boy steady saying that they got his phone. So instead of the police trying to talk to them, I know that, and I don't. His name is Jonathan Miller, but I have to call him White because he was white. And he instead the police telling him to go right up the street, but the police headquarters is maybe 3 minutes a walk, to go up and make a report. They don't tell them that. They instead want to chase Ryan. They chase Ryan down at the power light. No warning them. They were behind Ryan or telling Ryan, this is the police, stop running, whatever. The next thing everybody knows, Ryan's being shot up down in the parking lot with his back turned. Right to this day, I know Ryan probably never knew what happened, who was behind him, or nothing. I just feel it. He was just, like I say, he went down there to have some fun, as a young man would do, 24, just full of life. Not a drug. I didn't have a problem out of him. He wasn't on drugs. They wanted to try to. They did their own autopsy on him to try to see something, but they couldn't find that he was clean. He was clean because he was very athletic. He played ball. He was. This is my favorite month right here. It hurts me so bad because March is my favorite month of March with him, because I have all his trophies where he played ball and he was with the community centers playing ball. So he had a lot of friends and a lot of people, like I said, that wanted to hang with him because he was a leader. He wasn't a follower. So they all wanted to connect, and they went and was having this. His friends tell me to this day, they was just down there having themselves a normal, fun time, and the police came and really killed. They chased him and shot him in the back.
If I could just, I wanted to just kind of jump in here, if that's okay, Narene. So just to clarify, Ryan's friend was the one
Ollie.
who...
Is it Ollie or Kenny?
Yes, yeah, Ollie. Ollie was the one whom the 21-year-old white man accused of stealing his phone. Mm-hmm. And when the police dropped the pepper spray, the vapors went right into Ollie's eye, and he couldn't see. So he handed his car keys to Ryan, and Ryan promised, he said, I'll go get your car, I'll bring it around, and I'll pick you up here.
So they can get out of there.
So Ryan started running for that reason. Now, a lot of people were running because they were trying to get away from the pepper spray, and the police had also said to everyone, get out of here, leave. So that's why Ryan was running. The cops made it sound like he was running to get away from them, but he never knew they were behind him. And his purpose was to get to Ollie's car in the parking lot and bring it around and pick his friend up who was suffering real eye pain.
Yeah. And Ollie and Ryan are in two different builds of stature. So I can't even see how they can confuse or connect their body stature together. Because Ryan is shaped like a Pillsbury Doughboy, and Ollie is small. I mean, he's just a size.
Let me ask you. So, and this question is for both Miss Narene and Miss Sheila. Based on the last thing Miss Sheila said, was you were informed to get a lawyer. So I want to ask Miss Narene first this time, and then I want, if you don't mind, Miss Sheila to come afterward, okay?
Okay.
At what point were you ever, did anyone ever suggest to you, Miss Narene, that you need a lawyer, or was the situation of not being able to get information, what led, how did that happen? How did a lawyer get into, or did one ever get in?
When they told us that it was the police that killed Ryan, my auntie, she says, we're going to need a lawyer. You're going to need to get a lawyer. Because everybody was under the impression Ryan had just gotten crossed up in some shooting down at the power line. We never knew that it was the police until it came on the news, the social media.
How long was it a wait before you found that information out?
It was hours. I mean, hours. He was killed in the wee hours of the morning, and if I think right, they didn't come to us to that evening soon. Did I say it was way up in the night?
Yes, time. and actually, Narene found out by one of Ryan's friends who came and woke her up in the middle of the night, scared because he had heard his friends were down with him and had heard gunshots, and so Narene and her daughter actually went down to the Power and Light area and tried to find out. There were ambulances, police tape, and all that, and no one would say anything. And they also started accusing you, and they started drilling you with questions, right, Narene?
Yes. Yeah.
They saying like, how do you
took
know?
me into the outside, like they had me outside at a bus stop, interrogating me and asking me, how did I know, or who told me, because my son was down there, or that why was I thinking my son was over there? Because when I got there, it was all taped off and roped off, but I couldn't really see because, I'm not wanting that to be my baby. I'm not trying to admit that my baby is over there laying on the ground. And the police started telling me to go sit down at the bus stop and they'll send somebody over to talk to me. And so when they came to talk to me, they was asking me all crazy questions about what he looked like. Well, what was he doing down here? And it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. But they never said they did it. They never said that we shot him until they came to the house. They called me on the phone later on that night, after the late coming hot summer night, and asked me, could I meet them somewhere to talk about the welfare of Ryan? And I said no. I said, you can come to my home. But they had already been to my house, surrounded my house without me being aware, seeing the crowd. They saw the family, the friends, everybody was outside. So they had already scanned the house and it's in the report that there's a very large crowd at, my home, and they needed, I guess, backup, or they were going to need backup when they come to talk to me and tell me that they had killed Ryan.
They actually sent a SWAT team.
Yep.
Yeah.
They sent a SWAT team to Narene's house, surrounded the house, armed with guns, ready to shoot anything in their way. And before that even happened, Narene, your niece had called the police station.
Yes, she had called the police.
Ryan. And what did they say to her when she asked about it?
They told Keisha, just watch the news.
And they hung up on her.
And they hung up on her.
Okay, so we're going to double back, Miss Narene.
Okay.
So Miss Sheila, one of your neighbors said you need to call the police, and at this time it was, just to reiterate, was it confirmed or was it still up in the air? What had happened in terms of the police doing it?
Are you asking Narene or myself?
You. I'm asking you.
Oh, so I got texts from neighbors that they had heard a gunshot, and then I got texts from people, from friends that saying something's wrong. And so when we got to the scene, we did not know, when we got home, 15 minutes away, we did not know that the police had shot John. We kind of started to think, did he hurt himself? And so but we don't have firearms in our house. So I did not make sense of what was occurring. And it wasn't, I would say we were probably on the scene maybe 30, 45 minutes before an officer said, well, we're waiting for the officer involved shooting investigation team. And then my husband said, who are they and why do we care? And then they said, that is protocol in an officer involved shooting. And then that was the end of the information we got that evening. So we were not allowed to go back into our home because it was considered a crime scene. So we went and stayed at a relative's home that evening. And this is where Narene and our stories are so similar, because then the next day, officers came to my sister-in-law's house where we were staying, and wanted to talk to my husband and I. So we stupidly thought that they were there to answer our questions and to tell us what had happened to John, and there to assist us. And we figured out within 5 minutes of the conversation that they weren't there to answer our questions. They were there to interrogate us. And then they asked to separate my husband and I. And my husband's like, why would you need to separate us? Why would you just talk to the two of us? We're both John's parents. And at that point, we had one phone call with the attorney who ended up representing us. And as soon as my husband said, "We have spoken to an attorney," conversation stopped. Officers stopped, and we asked them that day, who shot John? How many times did they shoot John? Why would they shoot John? And they couldn't give us, or not couldn't, wouldn't give us any answers. And then they were asking us questions like, was John involved in drugs? Was he drinking alcohol? Was he violent? Was he, this was, we can look back now, Narene and I, and we can both say they were not there to investigate the shooting. They were there to investigate John and Ryan. And their playbook is to criminalize and dehumanize the person who has been killed. And they will get that story out as fast as they can so that the families you're in such shock over everything that has occurred. You don't have the time or the emotional bandwidth to start going, wait a minute, this isn't right. They hold all the information, so they hold all the cards.
The first installment of this, I spoke to Elise, Jean's sister.
Yes.
And what really making me cringe and was really bothering me is she had the same exact story. So this idea of the playbook, I would like to get into, and I would like to. Did you figure out it was a playbook in retrospect, or was there some point? And let me preface this, because I'm assuming the term playbook came much later, but the idea of them running a script or blocking you all from information, did you all begin to realize that during the early stages when you're, I guess, getting frustrated because you're not getting the answers? At what point did you realize that they were not being forthright, the officers and things of this nature? This is both of you to answer, whoever goes first.
I realized it when, like I said, they called and said they were calling me for welfare, or wanted to meet me with the welfare, Ryan. And then I realized it when I tried to contact the detective that had came to my home, and we tried to speak with him, on a one-on-one. And I already knew, I said they had already put their story together, or were going to put their story how they wanted it. And even when I saw it on the TV and newspaper, how 24-year-old Black man gets shot by police, they already had it. Or 24-year-old gets shot by police because he wouldn't put down the gun.
There was no gun.
And there was no gun.
Wow.
They didn't. 24-year-old gets shot by the police due to a robbery. I guess they were calling the phone a robbery.
Wow.
I mean, I realized when they kept twisting all the false narratives of Ryan, and never asked me, they hadn't even talked to us, the family. They never, and they wouldn't talk to us.
So, and if I can elaborate on that a little bit, because it does go to this idea of a playbook or a script, because both mothers they talked about waiting. Sheila's waiting on her neighbor's doorstep with police tape. They're not letting her get close to her son. Narene is first waiting at the scene, and they will not let her get close to her son. Both of these mothers, like any mother, her greatest desire, her need, her greatest need is to get to her child, and they won't let her. And so we're talking about waiting hours before they're able to piece this together. And in Narene's case, her niece calls the police department early in the morning, say around 7 a.m. Ryan was shot right around 3 a.m. They hang up on her. They say, watch the news. They watch the news, and they're learning about this through the newscaster on TV. And first it was black man, 24-year-old black man shot in a shootout with police. On the noon news, it's 24-year-old black man wouldn't put his gun down, and the police had no choice but to shoot him 5 times in the chest. Okay. By the evening news, they've named him. Ryan Stokes, 24-year-old black man, is shot in a shootout because he wouldn't put down his gun after he was trying to steal cars. And it was plural. Okay, this is before Narene has heard anything. And then when they too come to her house with the SWAT team all around, they say, we were forced to shoot him 5 times in the chest. But in reality, she finds out at Ryan's funeral is when she finds out he was shot twice in the back. He was not shot in his chest at all. He was shot in the back. And then in my investigation, I go to find out the policeman that shot him, Officer William Thompson, wasn't even one of the ones that was chasing after him. He was waiting in the parking lot for him and shot him without any warning, without any command, nothing. And he shot him in the back. And the autopsy proved that. So that was how, the playbook had started. And by that evening, all the public in the Kansas City metro area is thinking that Ryan deserved what he got. And the same happened with Sheila and the news and what happened with him. John was looking to run over the police officer. And I know, Sheila, we talked about this because what happened in Minneapolis just recently with Renee Good. Talk about a playbook. When I was watching the news and reading the news on that, they were using the exact same language as they used with John Albers. He weaponized the vehicle. He was planning on running the police officer over. The police officer had no choice but to shoot him 13 times, right? But video showed, in John's case, that the police officer was standing to the side and was never in any danger. But see, that's the playbook. And when you see what happened with Renee Good and the gentleman
Alex Brady
that was shot, he had a gun. He was waving his gun around. It's the same thing. They criminalize the victim. They blame the victim. And it just keeps happening. And it happened to both of them, John, and it happened to so many other mothers where they're not looking, they weren't looking to help the mothers. They were looking to find dirt on the victim.
They're typically in these investigations, whoever's there taking the evidence from the scene, they're typically there to do whatever they can to clear the officer of any misconduct. They're typically not there to do a fair, impartial investigation. And so they're going to dehumanize the person who has died. They're going to demonize them. And then they're going to put out a false narrative or omit crucial evidence in order to justify the shooting, clear the officer, case closed. And for us, I did not really realize how badly we were being lied to until our attorney got John's autopsy results back. And he had hired a forensic expert to take what little video we did have and reconstruct the scene where it occurred. And based on that report, it showed that the officer was to the side of the vehicle every time he fired his gun, and that John was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. He was clean like Ryan. And so then, and I would say that was probably 60 to 90 days after John was killed, where the full weight of how corrupt the system was, that it really hit me. And I do think that's where Narene and I, our lived experiences are different, in that because I'm white and I have lived in an affluent community and I've had trusting relationships with police officers. I think it took me a little longer to realize, oh my God, the system is not working on our behalf. It's working to protect itself. And so it did. I think it took me longer to question what was going on.
Yeah.
Because of my background.
Well, let me just thank you for saying that, because that is something that's rarely discussed and or even admitted from both sides. Well, there's multiple sides. So let's just be clear. There's not only black and white people on the planet. There's everybody. There's a whole bunch of people. Yeah. And we actually come from tribes and people, but that's neither here nor there. But what happens is there's a cultural understanding of this type of event, if you will, right?
Right.
And so now, what I would like to ask, particularly since you brought that up, because, well, no, I don't want to say it. Let me ask: do you think could that be one of the reasons that there's pushback when people from low to no communities are making these complaints, regardless to racial makeup, or we could just talk about class, but I mean, it is what it is. Black and brown people do get it differently. Do you think because there are folk that lived your experience, it takes they think that black folk or folk in low to no income communities are like polarizing or making something bigger because they don't know?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I absolutely believe that. I mean, it's a fact that police brutality cases have impacted communities of color more than white communities. I mean, there's just the statistics to show that. And then I think then it's been harder for some communities to come to the realization that we have a system that needs to change, because the negative repercussions haven't been felt as profoundly in a white community versus a community of color. And so, I mean, I had white friends, or I mean, these are people that are still my friends, who, when we kind of got our heads wrapped around what had occurred, a few of these friends said to me, I'm sure that they're like, I'm sure the black community is like, where the hell have you been? This has been a problem for a long time. And it was a wake-up call. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, that, the excessive use of force, the lack of transparency, and the lack of accountability has impacted the black community more than the white community. But the system, it's still now it finally people are realizing it's everybody's problem.
It's everybody.
It's everyone's problem, and it's a problem we all need to participate in fixing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that kind of perspective, particularly now after the two deaths that we just discussed of the ice agents to the white lady and the white gentleman. What was so? Wait, first let me ask you this. This is for you, Miss Sheila. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had with some of these folk in positions of power, or is that?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. So, we started to push for change in our community because of John's death, and we wanted our use of force policy changed, and we wanted greater training for police officers and with someone in a mental health crisis. And there was, and there still is, tremendous pushback on making those changes because it would increase accountability. My husband and I have been comments have been made on social media like they're just bad parents, they didn't get their son help, and I still get the occasional comment, oh, isn't that the kid who tried to run over the police officer? Wow. I still, in 8 years, I still get that comment. And so once the false narrative is out, trying to reverse that narrative is incredibly difficult. And then you get pushback from people in power who want to say that does not happen here. Our officers would not ever do that. We have a new police chief in Overland Park, thank God, who's been with us about a year now, and her thinking and is much different than our previous chief, but it's been an uphill battle to get any of those changes pushed forward. We just 2 weeks ago got the policy in Overland Park changed that if there is an officer involved shooting that involves a death or a serious injury, the city will release the body-worn camera footage from the incident. I mean, but it took us 8 years, and we are now only one of 2 police departments in the entire state that have a policy like that. So it's, when you go into this community activist type work, you've got to go into it like it's a marathon, because it's just going to be long. It takes a long time to bring systematic change into place.
It sure does.
So, I have a question. I want Miss Narene to answer first, then Miss Sheila, and then I'm going to come to Susan to talk about mothers in arms. And I'll pull again for Miss Elise, who defines or separates justice from accountability, right?
Yes.
So okay, so you guys are familiar with this. What does justice look like for you ladies? What does accountability look like for you ladies?
Accountability looks like, for me, is for them to admit that they did wrong, to give us the false narrative, changed Ryan's false narrative that they gave, give him his good character back, show that who he was, and not lie on Ryan. What did you say? Accountability and
injustice. What is justice?
Injustice.
Is there any justice?
I have been speaking and still going to speak. It'll be 13 years this July. And my title was, and is, I will say, Speaking the Truth to Injustice on Ryan. However I can spread the word, or however I can speak and talk about Ryan and let them know that all of it is a lie. It was an unjustifiable shooting, killing. And I'm going to speak on injustice and speak for my son, because he can't speak for himself now. It has to go through me and the family and the friends and you and the advocates, anybody that I can get to hear us or be with us and stand with us for Ryan. That's my injustice.
Ms. Sheila?
There is no justice for Ryan or John. That is unattainable. The only justice that could have happened would be that they would both still be with us. So the way we bring justice in the future is to prevent these things from happening. Like, Narene and I don't want another mother to endure what we've endured. We don't, we want to see excessive use of force stopped. And I'm not saying that there isn't ever a time a police officer needs to use lethal force. I think there are occasionally situations where there has to be lethal force. But
Yes.
but in the situations where the person was unarmed, not committing a crime, those incidences are still happening, and I think they're still happening because there's no accountability. And so rarely is an officer terminated, their license revoked, or they're charged, and that's what I feel like should have happened with both the officers in both of our cases, that the officer should have been terminated, they should have had their license revoked, and they should have been charged with involuntary manslaughter at the state level. And none of that happened. And in fact, the officer who killed John, Clayton Jennison, he was given a $70,000 severance package to resign. And the severance agreement said that they would report to the state that the officer they would report his departure from the police department as for personal reasons under ordinary circumstances, so that he would retain his peace officer license with the state of Kansas. And so, when you talk about there's been no justice, there's been no accountability. I think the only difference in Narene and I's cases is that we did receive a civil settlement in our civil lawsuit. Narene did not. We got, quite honestly, our case, we had video, and so that was helpful to us. And we also got a really good judge. And I think those are the two reasons why we ended up with a civil settlement and Narene did not. But that is literally that's the only difference. I mean, both officers, they walked away scot-free, completely scot-free.
Would you want to say something, Miss Narene?
I'm with Sheila. Like she said, she had a judge. She got the civil. I went to as top as the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And nothing. I went to St. Louis to was that federal court?
It was the appellate court, yeah.
Nothing. The judges just, they didn't want to hear us out. They didn't want to give us a trial. They didn't want to do anything. I didn't understand, why would they not want to at least be fair and give us a trial about Ryan. The judges it went into qualified immunity, which I'm so confused with that. They got him under qualified immunity. It's ugly. I don't like it. It hurts. We
And
we
that is
never got us chance. We never got a chance.
no, you didn't. And that is where the lack of transparency creates the lack of accountability.
Yeah.
And that is still a problem. I mean, Alex Preedy, who was killed in Minneapolis by federal agents, those federal agents had body cameras on them, and the federal government has acknowledged that that footage exists, and the federal administration says we're not going to release it right now. Well, you don't release it, then there's no accountability.
Before we move on, what does it look like for cultural workers to help you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Can they help? Can people who go around interviewing people, or people who go around doing surveys, or people who go around and observing communities and taking notes just for the fact of helping communities, what would you ask of them?
I can answer that question if that's okay with you, Lamont.
Please.
Vote locally as well as nationally. That's step one. And the reason, and that sounds very trite, but what I learned in looking in writing about Sheila and Narene's stories is that it all comes down to your district attorney or your prosecutor
or your city council.
It comes down. That person is the person who decides whether they're going to charge an officer for an officer-involved shooting. That's a lot of power, okay? And the problem is that district attorney or that county prosecutor, they're elected, and they need police officers to try all their other cases. They need them to collect the right evidence and to be able to offer testimony, right? So there is a partnership between the two. So what happens is in both John and Ryan's case is you have a district attorney or a county prosecutor, in Ryan's case in Kansas City, where they're having to investigate the very people that they depend on for all their other trials. And to win, a district attorney, they have to get elected. And so how they win is that they win cases. And the more cases they win, they're more likely to get reelected. So voting at the local level is so important because you can have a huge difference in who your district attorney or county prosecutor is. And very few people understand that. That's a lot of power. They decide to charge criminally. If they don't, then what Sheila and Narene both had to do was try in the civil court. Okay, that's a separate thing, right? But criminally, no police officer got charged because the DA didn't want to go again. They said there wasn't enough evidence or that the shooting was justified in both of these cases. Also, the judges, those are elected positions. And as Sheila said, are appointed. They're appointed positions by the president. All right. So what happens is every time a president is elected, all those judges that have been appointed at the appellate and the district level get reappointed. Okay. And so in the 8th district, if you look at the makeup of the judges there, almost all of them were appointed by President Bush Jr., and President Trump. And that's just kind of the way the cycle works. So That's the most important way that regular citizens can help. Secondly, it's very easy for any citizen to ask for information from the police. It's called the Freedom of Information Act, and all they have to do is write an email to the police department, to the city manager, to whomever, to the district attorney, whomever they want, and they can say, I would like to see, let's say, the police reports for the incident that happened on July 7th. And Sheila has done a lot of work in the Freedom of Information Act and how local citizens can get more information. One of the main reasons why I wanted to write the book is because no one knows what happens after. In the newspapers, all we get the narrative that the police decide, and the reporters will print it word for word. But nobody knows what happens afterwards. Nobody knows how the notification of death went for Sheila and Narene. No one knows that. No one knows how their cases went, both criminally and civilly, how they were treated, the social media that both of them had to deal with. You know, people saying about Ryan, well, what was he doing down there anyway?
Yeah.
And I would say, what were the 2,000 other people down there doing anyway? Right? It's a very popular spot. There were thousands of people down there. And with John, well, what was he doing anyway? Why did he try to run over the officer? It's like, because that's what the newspaper says. So vote and find some information on your own. You can do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the most powerful thing you can do is stay in constant contact with your own city council.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're there right there in your community. You have access to them. You could go to a city council meeting. You can ask them to meet you for coffee. You can require them to have a conversation with you. And then you can start asking them questions about policy and training. And then it becomes very personal. And I think when you go about making change, starting at the local level is always the best. I mean, and if you can change a policy in your own community, and if you like we now have banned shooting into moving vehicles. It took us 2 years to make that happen. We have the requirement for crisis intervention training has increased. But it's all very local work. But when you get a success and a win in your own little community, then you try to take it to the next community and to the next community. So Johnson County, where I live, I'm 20 minutes from Narene in Jackson County. Then there's a county kind of between us. It's Wyandotte County. And Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, they have withheld body cam footage on several officer involved shootings. And I am trying to work with that community to change that policy. There was a case 2 years ago where an unarmed DoorDash driver was killed. Community couldn't see the video. Officer still works for the police department. I mean, so you start local, and then you just, you ripple it out to as many neighboring communities as you can. And city council members, they can't hide from you forever. Show up at a city council meeting, make a public comment. Like, those are all things that we can personally do in our own communities that create uncomfortable conversations that need to be had.
No.
But you want to say something, Miss Narene?
No, I'm agreeing with Sheila. Oh, yeah.
So, okay, so tell us about Mothers in Arms.
Well, that's the book that going to have a different title, but it is the story of Narene and I and our friendship, and Ryan and John, and Sue is the writer, and we have a publisher. And our stories are gonna be told, and I think that's the stories will hopefully inspire change and create hope.
We have a date, at least a month date. It's going to come out next March, 2027. We are so excited about that. And in the book, you hear from Sheila and Narene directly as the mothers. And I think that anyone who not only has experienced this in their community or to someone that they love, but any mother and father, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, grandparent that worries about their children. In Sheila's case, and she talked about this, John was adopted, and there are so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in this country who have adopted children and worry because adopted children have a different lived experience than birth children do. And in John's case, he was having to adjust to things that were going on. His mental health issues were a lot of things that had happened based on his early childhood before he came to Sheila and Steve. Anyone who has a child with a mental health issue, you know, most shootings, we talk about that nationwide. Black people are 3 times more likely to be shot by policemen and women than a white person. Black children are 6 times more likely to be shot. People with mental health issues are also more likely to be shot than someone who is neurotypical in some way or another. You know, Latinos we're looking at 2 times more often. So I think that this book is going to appeal to a lot of people, and their underlying, Sheila and Narene's underlying friendship is the glue and that heartbeat that goes throughout these stories. And I wanted to offer hope at the end. And I'm so glad, Lamont, that you asked the question about what can other people do to help, you know, and Sheila articulated that so well. And you know, we got to give a lot of credit. I talk about her town, Overland Park, because they have made significant changes. Their new chief of police came from Boulder, Colorado, Chief Jokers. She is a mover and a shaker, and things are happening there. They are all about transparency and accountability. Their mayor, Mayor Skoog, their city manager, whom he hired, they're different than the old guard. And so things have happened, and it shows what the average citizen can do, because citizens did show up at those city council meetings back in 2018, 2019. Kansas City, it's a whole different story. Nothing has changed. Narene got nothing.
Yeah.
And so the book, I'm really proud of their stories. I'm proud of the bravery of these women and the bravery of all the women, mothers, the mothers who are out there in this country. And you're interviewing, I know you interviewed Elisa and you're interviewing more. This is first and foremost a mother's story, and a story of love and challenge and bravery and being able to overcome.
I really thank you for that. It looks like Ms.
Narene, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. And we saw the fabulous Mr. Melvin in the background helping you. Melvin is one of my favorite people.
I was like, help me. I couldn't see y'all at first. It went away. Okay.
Oh, well, that's okay. There's a feedback, but we're about to come to a close. Before we come to, I want to thank you all. Is there what if there was a toolkit, if there was a piece of information, if there was something that you want a parent or a loved one to kind of get it together and try to do immediately, God forbid they find themselves in this, what would be your best piece of tool or advice?
Narene, there we go.
Okay. You said a parent or a loved one.
If a loved one, if a mother finds herself in this situation, what would you tell? What would you say now that God forbid someone finds themselves in the situations you ladies found yourself in, to kind of arm them with how to proceed or think or move?
Ooh, that's hard.
I would say, because I have reached out to a few families when something has occurred and I worried that something questionable occurred. I have personally told families, say nothing, like go quiet, go dark on social media until you have spoken to an attorney who is experienced and successful in police misconduct cases. And I'm not talking just your average attorney. I'm talking someone who is well versed in civil rights and police misconduct. And I know the urge is to get out there on social media and tell a different story. But I think that you go quiet initially, you speak to that attorney, you follow that person's advice, and you proceed slowly and methodically, because the system is set up to protect them. It's not set up to protect you. And you want to, that's how you protect yourself and your family first. And then as it moves forward, ask questions, ask all the questions, and then ask for the proof, ask for the documentation, ask for the body cam footage, ask for the report, like ask for all of it. Because the information is what's going to give you the power to create accountability if accountability is necessary.
Are there any questions from the attendees? You can either put it in the Q&A box or in the chat.
You know, I want to add one while you're gathering the questions, Lamont. I want to add another thing, and this was something that I learned through Ryan's case. A lot of times, police need to talk to witnesses, and they need to talk to other people, and we want to help. You know, if we see a family member, a friend, someone in our neighborhood that we know that is shot down, we want to help. You know, it's our instinct. And that's good. That's a really, really good thing. And for a lot of police cases, they need us. And that's wonderful. And you know, when good police are doing their jobs, it works. However, in a shooting like this, just remember that if a police officer wants to bring you in for questioning, okay, you don't have to stay there and speak to them and keep answering questions. Too many people don't realize that unless you're under arrest, you can leave. And so I would.
And say nothing.
And you can say nothing. And that's what I would recommend anyone in a case of an officer involved shooting. Please do this, which is be very respectful to the police officers and say, no disrespect, officer, but I do not want to speak until I have my lawyer present. And even if you don't have a lawyer right now, you can still say that, okay? And you don't have to stay there. In Ryan's case, his best friend, Ollie, the one that had been originally accused, had to go in for questioning. They asked him to go in for questioning. He wanted to help. He felt terrible about what had happened to his best friend, and he wanted to help. And the whole thing turned to where they were trying to get Ollie to admit that he had stolen the phone, which he hadn't. Here's the problem. If he admitted to that, which again, he did not steal a phone, but if he admitted to that, they could have tried him for felony murder, which is what he did caused the police to shoot Ryan. And so that's so important that we want to help police in all and we have all the right intentions, but just be careful for yourself. There's nothing wrong with you saying, I would be happy to talk to you when my lawyer is present. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you all so much for participating. And we just have to be in touch. But just thank you all so much. There's big bad feedback with your phone, Miss Narene.
I see now.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, what were we going to say?
Oh, she's muted. You're mute.
You're muted.
Narene, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was having some technical difficulties again. I don't know what's going on right here. I see you though, and I've got an echo.
Yes, that's feedback. So, what did you want to have? Did you have a last statement?
No.
Ms. Sheila, do you have a last statement?
I just want to thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. Narene and I love any opportunity that we can get out together and talk about Ryan and John and the changes that we're hoping to make. So thank you, Lamont, so much.
Yes.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Ms. Narene. Susan,
Thank you so much
any
for
last
this
thoughts?
opportunity. Yeah, just thank you again for letting us let Narene and Sheila tell their stories. And we know that this story is a repeat for so many people that are looking for help and looking for just someone to believe in them. And we hope that this book and that Sheila and Narene's stories can inspire others and know that you are not alone.
Thank you. All right, good folks. We're going to sign off. Contact me during the week, Susan, so we can have a little business meeting. Ladies, anything you need, just contact me, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.